Hi guys, today I'm going to take you through an UltraTEV Plus 2. So to turn the instrument on, we press the green button for about a second and then it will go through a boot up process. While it's booting up, it'll run a few self checks, make sure it's got everything healthy on the inside of it, software wise, and it will tell you. So here we've got self check pass. Okay, and then we come to the home screen. So you've got 9 items on the screen and you've got 4 buttons that you can click. So these are all clickable and these are all touchscreen up here. So if we go through each screen, I'll show you what the options are in each one. So TEV, so if we were going to take a TEV measurement, we would click on TEV and that brings you to another 6 options and then 2 options are blanked out. The 2 options that are blanked out are for when you use the UltraTEV Plus 2 locator probe. They will become active and you can do that. We'll show you that in another video. The rest of them are for taking TEV measurements. So the one that we most use out in the field and we train people to use is this one up here called phase plot. So if we click on that, that will give us our screen that shows us all the information we need to figure out if we've got partial discharge or not. We've got our decibel level at the top here. We've got our pulse per cycle count here. We've got a severity level here. The severity is just a piece of mathematics between the decibels and the pulses, so you can compare things against each other. And then down the bottom here we have our phase plot. What is happening here is this TEV plate. So physically the TEV plate is behind this piece of plastic up the top, which I'll show you. It's just there. So behind there is a capacitive voltage sensor that's tuned to 2 to 80 megahertz, and it's looking for very fast rise time pulses of voltage that are caused by PD and caused by the electromagnetic signals coming from those, from the cause of PD. Now what that's doing is right now it's taking a measurement. I don't have any PD right in front of me, so I've got a very low reading of 2 decibels, 1 decibel and 0 pulse per cycle. Over here, this is a new feature. There's an algorithm that's running in the background that looks at the phase plot and tells us whether it thinks it's noise or partial discharge. So when you do find partial discharge, you'll find a pattern comes up on this screen here, and that each PD source has its own individual pattern, and the algorithm will work with that to tell you what the answer is. Now let's go through the settings. So if we go to the settings, so you can either click this button or this button. That'll take you through to the settings. So now what we have is a screen that's telling us, this first one here is what sound is coming in through our headphones. We can either listen to ultrasonics through our headphones or we can listen to the sound of TEV through the headphones, okay? So if you ever want to listen to TEV, you can put your headphones into the bottom, put them on your head, go around and take your TEV readings, and you can listen to the sound of TEV. By default, that's set to ultrasonic. You've also got a mute button. You can turn off and on the sound that's coming into your headphones, and you've got a volume slider. So you can have low volume up to maximum volume, and that's what that setting does. Next one here is your phase lock options. So by default, it's set to photo, and what that is that's looking for a photovoltaic source. In other words, it's looking for the flash of the light bulbs in the vicinity of where you are, and it'll pick up the 50 hertz off those light bulbs. So right now I'm sitting in a room that's got fluorescent light bulbs. At the moment we're running at 49.97 hertz, or the network is. And if I cover up this little sensor here, that number will go red. And you can see that go red there. So what that's doing is I've blocked the light between the sensor and the lights, and it's lost its phase lock. So ideally when you take all your readings, you want that number to be white, and there's a couple of different ways that you can get a phase lock, okay? So first one is the lights, second one is E field. If you change that over to E field, what it's then going to do is try and get a 50 hertz signal that's in the air. So right now you can see it's gone white. The reason that's gone white is because I do have some 240 volt AC leads right near me, but that's not always the case, but that's where that one picks up. Then you've got this one called wireless. If we go to wireless, you have to have another piece of kit called a wireless phase reference, and I'll show you how to use that in another video. And then we've got manual mode. So when we go to manual mode, you'll see that this number goes orange instead of white or red. So when it's orange, you know you're in manual mode, and you can click plus and minus. So if I click plus as an example, you'll see this number go up. So if I click plus, goes to 50.01, 0.02, 03, and then negative is vice versa. We'll go back down. Basically, you can lock your instrument onto the phasing and capture really good, nice, neat phase plots out in the field. That's how that one gets used. What else is in this settings menu here? So I've clicked settings again. If you click on this one here is called persistence mode. Now persistence mode by default is set to infinity, or you can move it down to 4 different spots. Basically what it does is if you go back to one of these ones that's not infinity, it will constantly refresh your phase plot. It's like pressing pause, refresh over and over and over, and it will do that automatically for you. I like to keep mine at infinity and reset my phase plot myself. But that's just me. Okay, so that's that whole menu. Now, if you want to record, you would press the record button. If you want to pause the phase plot and have a look at all that data, you can then zoom in and have a look at the phase plots. We can see here that there's a bit of activity coming up here, and we can also zoom out. If you hit the pause refresh button, that will just wipe that screen completely. So if I go back a screen, here is my interpretation mode. So interpretation mode, what that does is it looks at the decibel level, it looks at the pulse per cycle count, and it tells you what it thinks. So at the moment I've got a very low level of activity, no pulses per cycle, and it's telling me no concern. And I do agree with that because there's absolutely no PD here at the moment. Now what I have with me here is a PD generator. This is a spark gap source that I can turn on and off. So what I'm going to do here is I will turn this on. When that turns on, sparks are getting generated inside this box here, or PD is getting generated, and my instrument here is picking up 27 decibels of energy, and it's picking up 3 pulses per cycle. And based on that, it's telling me that there's likely medium level internal partial discharge occurring. Okay, so if I, as an example, move this to the top and put it right on the sensor, we will get an even higher level because our sensor is closer to the source. We've got 59 decibels, 3 pulses, likely high level internal PD. So that's how that works. Now remember, this is a good rule of thumb. It doesn't care about the phase plot. All it cares about is those 2 numbers. It does some maths and goes to a lookup table, and it will tell you what it thinks. It's not always correct. The next one is the measure screen. So the measure screen it tells you your decibels, your pulses, your severity, and it tells you what your last 2 seconds of reading was. So if I move this closer to it, we'll see that the reading goes up in amplitude, and as we move it away, it will drop in amplitude. And if I turn my PD source off, we will get a very, very low level of PD, or no PD, I should say. So that's how that screen works. Phase plot, I've already shown you that. The histogram. So the histogram will tell you where all the pulses have occurred in terms of the number of pulses versus the decibels of the pulses. So if I turn this up, we see that we get a lot of pulses occurring around the 35 to 36, 37 mark here. And then if I move that to the top, we get an even higher level up here at the 60 decibel. We can pause and refresh that, and it's showing me this is a little bit of noise down here that we don't care about, and this is our PD source. And as I move that away, it will fill in different levels. So that's good for counting up how many PD pulses are occurring at what different decibel level. Then we have our waveform screen. So our waveforms, you'll see this very, very fast flashing blue line down the bottom. If I hit pause, I can then zoom in on that. And that is just basically my background noise. Okay, so if I zoom out, what I'll do is I'll turn my PD source on, and I've got a nice sharp PD pulse occurring now. So what I can do is then zoom in on that. What you can do with this out in the field and also in the software is the sharper and faster that first line is, from the bottom to the top, the sharper and faster that is, the more likely that it is that it's PD and not noise, and also the more likely that you are closer, physically closer to it from where you're testing to where the PD source is. So if I turn that off, we just get background noise. If I turn it on, we get a nice sharp pulse occurring. So that's how that one works. When you're doing cable PD testing, you can also map along here via the the time domain reflectometry test method, and you can figure out where your PD pulses are occurring with reference to the how long the cable is. And then we've got our 3D phase plot. So you can see here that there's these 3 lines of activity that are scrolling across the screen. What you're looking at is this test source is pumping out 3 pulses per cycle, and it is moving across the screen because we're not locked onto the phasing. This thing runs off a battery. This is locked onto 49.99 Hz. If I change basically my phase lock down to whatever this thing's running at, which I'll find it in a sec. It's basically once it stays still. There you go. So this is running off a battery. It's pumping out signals at 49.73 Hz or thereabouts, and all of my pulses are staying still. So if I move this closer, this should all go up in amplitude, which it does. And as I move it away, it will get weaker in amplitude. So that's another way of looking at your phase plot out in the real world. And then if I turn this off, all of the signals go away. So it is a 3D phase plot. It's another way of viewing the phase plot. The other phase plot is obviously a 2-dimensional one. This is the 2-dimensional one. If I turn this on, you can see here how there's 3 pulses of energy right up here at 52 decibels. Okay, and that is what we're looking at in 2D mode as opposed to 3D mode. Okay, so that's all the TEV measurements.